Today I want to talk to you about evidence. Evidence is really important. Evidence is important, that we can build our faith on evidence. But also sometimes you will encounter people that say things and indicate things that don't have any evidence. And so it's important for us to be critical thinkers. It's important for us to look at the evidence and see where the evidence leads us. We're going to talk about evidence today, and I would like to show you a Bible verse. It says here, first of all, you must understand that in the last days scoffers will come, scoffing and following their own evil desires. They will say, where is this coming that he promised? Ever since our fathers died, everything goes on as it has since the beginning of creation. Have you noticed that today? There's a lot of people that kind of scoff that, oh, you believe in the Bible, you believe in God, you believe in the Creator, you believe Jesus is coming back. Where is this coming that he promised? The Bible actually predicted that this was going to happen. The Bible verse goes on, it says, but they deliberately forget that long ago by God's word the heavens existed and the earth was formed out of water and by water. By these waters also the world of that time was deluged and destroyed. The Bible says there'll be scoffers, and they're going to deliberately forget that God is the creator and that God created everything on this planet, but there was a worldwide flood a long time ago. They deliberately forget this. The verse goes on, by the same word, the present heavens and earth are reserved for fire, being kept for the day of judgment and destruction of ungodly men. So just like we believe that there was a creator that created everything, there was a worldwide flood in the past, so we also believe that Jesus is coming back, and that this present world we have is going to be completely destroyed. Now, one of the things that we find is that you have the theory of evolution that is commonly taught in a lot of our schools. A lot of people believe in the theory of evolution. Perhaps some of you here are evolutionists or believe in the theory of evolution. So I want to just respectfully talk about the theory today. But evolution essentially is based on long time periods. When you look at evolutionary theory, it's millions and billions of years. Another thing about evolution is that they use one of their main sources of evidence is something known as radioisotope or carbon-14 or radiocarbon dating. This is what they use to come up with a lot of these theories of long time. Do I need to put the screen back on for you? You're good? Okay. Now, when you look at the theory of creation, I personally believe in the theory of creation. And remember, these are both theories because none of us were there when it happened, so we pretty much go with the evidence where the evidence leads. When you look at the theory of creation uses very short time periods, and this is only thousands of years. According to the theory of creation in the Bible, this world, everything we see on this world was created about 6,000 years ago. So you can see these two theories have a lot of difference. One is millions and billions of years, and the other one is just a few thousand years. And when you look at the theory of creation, our primary source for this theory of creation is something known as the Bible. And so a lot of people that don't believe in the Bible or are skeptics or ridicule the Bible or don't appreciate the Bible, they feel that this is all the evidence we have is the Bible. Now, what we're going to do today is we're going to be talking about radiocarbon dating, and I'm just going to share with you some things about radiocarbon dating. We're going to cover a lot of ground today, and if you would like a handout about what we've talked about today, you can email me at adventistpastor@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to share with you a handout over what we're covering as well as some other things. But then at the end, if we have time, we're going to talk a little bit about evidence for creation, evidence for the theory of creation. Now, when you look at dating methods, there is radioactive and carbon dating. Carbon-14 dating is one, and radioactive isotopes is the other. Okay, so let's talk about carbon-14 dating. Carbon-14 dating is used for dating organic or dead objects. Okay, trees, leaves, skeletons. This is what you would use carbon-14 dating for. Now, this is measured in thousands of years. Now, when we look at the isotope dating, radioactive isotope dating, this is used for dating rocks. And it's dates in millions or billions of years. So I'm going to just, let's go back and let's do a little quiz here, okay? I have a rock here. If I want to test and see how old this rock is, what am I going to use? Am I going to use carbon-14 dating or radioactive isotope dating? Okay, so this is radioactive isotopes because this is inorganic. This is a rock, okay? Now, Kimchi, my dog, has her old bone here that I brought to church. If I want to see how old this old bone is, what am I going to test this with? This would be carbon-14 dating, okay? Then I have this piece of wood. I don't know how old this piece of wood is, so I would use, what would I use to test this? Carbon-14. And then I have this really beautiful fossil. You can't really see it, but this is actually a piece of stone that has all of these little sea creatures that were stuck in the stone, and then or mud, and it hardened into stone. So if I wanted to see how old these little guys were, I would test this, the stuff around it. And what would I use to test this? This would be used radioactive isotopes. I'd be testing the stone, right? But if I was testing the little critters themselves, I would use carbon-14. Does that kind of make sense? And so if I'm testing the rock, what kind of date would I get back? In what time frame do you think? Good. This would be millions or billions because this is radioactive isotope dating. And if I'm testing my old bone here with carbon-14, carbon-14 is thousands of years. Okay, so this is going to make sense as we move through our little talk today, or study today. Thank you. So let's talk about carbon-14 dating, okay? So with carbon-14 dating, each living object has a ratio of carbon-14 and ordinary carbon, okay? So you look at Ave over here. Ave was up here talking. He's alive. We know he's alive. And Ave has a certain ratio of carbon-14 and ordinary carbon in his body, just like all the other humans in this room. Not the same as the log, because the log has a different ratio than Ave does, but it also has a ratio. So whenever something is alive, you have this ratio. But whenever something dies, the carbon-14 starts to decay. Let me explain this another way, okay? Carbon-14 and ordinary carbon stay the same while the object is alive, but when the object dies, ordinary carbon remains constant, but carbon-14 breaks down into nitrogen slowly. Now you might be saying, I came here for a Bible study and this doesn't make any sense. This is way over my head. Just follow along. You're going to find some really fascinating things about science today, okay? Because let's just demonstrate how this looks, okay? So if we have a piece of wood, and if it's living, it has so much carbon-14 and so much carbon in it. But after the piece of wood dies, the carbon-14 starts decreasing while the carbon stays the same. And then as it gets older, the carbon-14 gets a little bit less, and the carbon-14 gets a little bit less as it gets older, until finally, after about 50,000 years, there's no more carbon-14 present. Okay? And this is the important thing to remember, is that anything over 50,000 years old should have too little carbon-14 to measure. So we can sit there and we can say, okay, Ave is a living person. He has so much carbon-14 in his body. And then we find a corpse of somebody else and we're like, I wonder how long ago they died. So then they measure the carbon-14 and they're like, okay, the decay rate of carbon-14 is at this specific level. So they're able to calculate it out and say, oh, well, if Ave has so much and this has so much, this died so long ago. And they can do the same thing with bones. They can do the same thing with trees. They can say, okay, the living tree has so much carbon-14, and this dead piece of branch here has so much carbon-14, and they can calculate it out, and that's how they use carbon-14 to measure the date of the estimated time that it died, or how long it's been dead. It assumes everything has remained exactly as it is today. So when you do these tests, you have to make certain assumptions. And here's something to remember. When they do carbon-14 dating on a bone, or they do carbon-14 dating on a piece of wood, they assume that everything has stayed the same exactly as it is today. Now I have a question for you. Over the past, let's say, 10,000, 100,000 years, do you think everything has stayed the same as it is today? No. So this assumption that everything stays the same is not an accurate assumption. They assume that the ratio of carbon and carbon-14 in the air has stayed the same, and they assume that the rate at which objects pick up carbon-14 stays the same. But you know what? We have found, and science has proven, that that is not accurate. Factors affecting carbon-14 dating, okay? The ratio of carbon-14 in the air has not remained constant. They've actually done studies, and we know it hasn't remained constant because there was a rise of carbon-14 in the air with the atmospheric testing of the atomic bombs in the 1950s. This was spelled wrong. This would make things appear younger when they are tested. Another thing is that it assumes that it has remained exactly as it is today, and we know that the ratio of carbon and carbon-14 in the air has not remained the same because science knows that this has been changed after the testing of atomic bombs in the 1950s. So right there, the first assumption is not accurate, so that means the dating cannot be accurate either. The rate at which objects pick up carbon-14, do we know if that has remained constant? Well, carbon-14 dating is not reliable. Now, this comes as a surprise perhaps to a lot of people, but the scientists know that the carbon-14 dating is not reliable. Let me give you a few examples. They found this musk ox in let me back up here for just a minute, okay? Where are we at? Okay, anything over 50,000 years old should have too little carbon-14 to measure, right? We know that. Anything over 50,000 years old. But coal is supposed to be about 290 to 360 million years old. So coal is natural products that have turned into coal, and so you would assume if coal is, 300 million years old, there should not be any carbon-14 in coal. And yet the interesting thing is that no coal has ever been found that completely lacks carbon-14. All the coal that they have tested all has carbon-14 in it, which tells you that coal has to be less than 50,000 years old, even though in the theory of evolution, coal is about 300 million years old. So then you have to say to yourself, this is not getting so accurate. A sample of wood found in a rock that is supposedly 230 million years old gave a carbon-14 date of 33,720 years old. Freshly killed seals have been dated at 1,300 years. This means they are supposed to have died over a millennium ago. Other seals, which have been dead no longer than 30 years, were dated at 4,600 years. So we will read an article in Science magazine or something like that saying, hey, we did carbon-14 dating on this, and it's dating at 25,000 years old. But the problem is that date, 25,000, is not an accurate date. I mean, just imagine if you were to go to the doctor and they say, we need to test your blood sugar. You're going to assume that the test is going to be accurate. And let's say they come back and they say, okay, your blood sugar is 90. And you're like, I would like you to test that with another machine. And they test it with another machine. They come out and they're like, your blood sugar is 400. And you're like, you know what? 90, 400. Can you test it on another machine? And they come back and they say, your blood sugar is 12. Would you accept those numbers? No. And the thing that's interesting about carbon-14 dating is there's a lot of discrepancy in the dates that are coming back. Wood was cut out of living, growing trees, although only a few days old. I mean, we knew it came out of this tree on this date. It's just a few days old. It was dated as having existed 10,000 years ago. This comes from not a pastor, not a theologian. This comes from a scientist, The Use and Abuse of Radiocarbon, Annals of the New York Academy of Science. So this is a scientific journal, and this is what he says. Pay close attention. It may come as a shock to some, but fewer than 50% of the radiocarbon dates from geological and archaeological samples in the northeastern North America have been adopted as acceptable by investigators. So how many of the dates do they say that's acceptable? Fewer than half. Do you know what that tells you? More than half they've thrown out. Can you imagine a doctor looks at the lab work and he goes, I don't believe that one. I don't believe that. No, let me look at the patient. They're sitting here talking. I don't believe that one. I don't believe it. Yeah, that kind of looks, yeah, let's go with that one. If a physician were to do that with lab work, we would have to say, you know what, we need to get some better quality control in the lab. And yet, when we look at carbon-14 dating, the scientists tell us less than 50% of the dates are accepted as, that's acceptable. That's kind of in the range we're looking for. Carbon-14 dating was being discussed at a symposium on the prehistory of the Nile Valley. A famous American colleague, Professor Brew, briefly summarized a common attitude among archaeologists toward it as follows. Okay, this is what he says. If a carbon-14 date supports our theories, we put it in the main text. If it does not entirely contradict them, we'll put it in a footnote. And if it's completely out of date, we just drop it. So essentially, we're going to test this, and we test it for carbon-14, and I think this is probably 50,000 years old. So we test it, and it comes back at 20,000, and we're like, I'll just drop that date. Just ignore it. Don't use that date. Don't use that at all. But I test it, and it comes back at 45,000. I'm like, well, that's close. We can put that in a footnote. But then if I test it and it comes back at 50,000 and I think it's 50,000, then we'll use that in the main text. And when we use it in the main text, everybody is like, oh, that is so cool. We have evidence that this is 50,000 years old. But the truth of the matter is that evidence is not really accurate evidence. And this is one of the things to remember, that a lot of people that use carbon-14 dating to support the theory of evolution, the scientists themselves even have a lot of questions about these methods and actually how accurate they are. The troubles of the radiocarbon dating methods are undeniably deep and serious. It should be no surprise then that fully half of the dates are rejected. Now this comes from another scientific journal, and again they say half of the dates are rejected. We just aren't going to use that. Again, if you were to imagine a doctor in the hospital, he looks at the x-ray and says, nah, I don't believe that x-ray. No, I don't believe that x-ray. Yeah, I think that one looks kind of like yeah, let's go with that x-ray. We wouldn't accept this from a physician, and yet this is what's happening in the scientific world. Look at what it says here. It should be no surprise then that fully half of the dates are rejected. The wonder is surely that the remaining half come to be accepted. So, what I'm saying here today is if you hear a person or you read an article that says, well, this is 25 million years old, or this is 50,000 years old, or this is 25,000 years old, don't just say, well, look at the evidence. That's amazing. I mean, how can this contradict the Bible? I mean, the Bible must be wrong because look at, they use carbon-14 dating. Well, carbon-14 dating has its flaws. Let's talk again about radioactive isotopes. We've just briefly covered the carbon-14 dating, but let's talk about radioactive isotopes. Does anybody remember what we would use radioactive isotopes to test? What would we test with radioactive isotopes? Okay, this is inorganic material. This is inanimate things. This would be stones. This would be the mud flows that has fossils in it. It's like, how old is that fossil? Well, here's the thing. If I think that fossil is 300 million years old, am I going to test that fossil with carbon-14? No, because carbon-14 is only going to get me to what? 50,000. So what they will do is we test the rock around it, and that's going to get me hopefully to my millions of years. This is why a lot of times they'll say, we found this fossil, and the fossil, we tested it with radioactive isotopes, and this fossil is 400 million years old. You're like, I thought Pastor Mark said you can't test a fossil. No, you can't test the fossil, but you can test what it was laying in. And so this is what they will use, is they will use radioactive isotopes to test the stone around it. Now this stone here is stone, but when this stone was baby stone, when this stone was born, it would be just a mud flow. And over the millions and millions of years, according to the theory of evolution, it hardened, okay? So let's talk a little bit about radioactive isotopes. But before we do, remember carbon-14 is used for dating the organic things, and radioactive isotopes are used for dating rocks. And what is the time range for radioactive isotopes? Millions or billions of years. So you'll hear people say, hey, you know what? This fossil is 500 million years old. Right away you think, okay, they must have tested that with radioactive isotopes. A lot of people think that radioactive isotopes are very accurate. I mean, if they test this, then obviously that is the truth. It is so accurate. But let's take a look for just a few minutes at a few points about radioactive isotopes, okay? The first thing to remember is radioactive products break down or decay into other products. So just like we talked a little bit about the decay of carbon-14, less and less carbon-14, we can measure that and draw some conclusions. We can do the same about radioactive isotopes. And some of the radioactive isotopes that are out there is potassium-40. Potassium-40 is radioactive, and it decays into argon-40. Then you have uranium-235, and that decays to lead-206. Now you might say, this is way over my head, I'll never remember this. You don't have to remember this. We're just explaining how you come up with these dates. So essentially we call it the mother product, and the mother product would be potassium-40, and then it decays into the daughter product. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to test this, and I'm going to say how much mother product and how much daughter product, and then I'm able to do my calculations if I'm a scientist, and I figure it all out from there. But this is what they're using, is they're using these radioactive isotopes, such as potassium-40, uranium-235. Now, the decay rates and the concentrations can be measured very accurately for modern times. So in modern times, we know that to decay from the mother product to the daughter product takes how much time. And they have their little charts, and they've done their research, and it's very accurate for our modern times. But here's the thing. Has everything stayed the same for the past 300 million years? Even evolutionists will tell you it hasn't. Evolutionists will tell you for the past 2 billion years, things have not looked like this. Sun comes up, 70 degrees in San Francisco is a hot day for the past 2 billion years? No. There's been changes in weather, there's been changes in pressure, there's been changes in temperature, there's all these changes. But when they measure radioisotopes, they can say for today, they're very accurate for the conditions we have today in modern times. Now there's some unprovable assumptions, okay? The unprovable assumption is, number one, decay rates have always been constant. And this makes sense. If you were to say, okay, I'm going to test this rock here, and I want to see how much daughter product is in this rock, I would have to assume that decay rates have always been constant. Point number two is the rock or specimen has always been isolated from other isotopes. It's a closed system. Because if this rock were to ever touch this, or ever touch this, or ever touch this, we might have some leaching of radioisotopes that goes across. So I have to assume that if I'm going to test this rock has never touched another rock in his whole life. Now, do you think that assumption is accurate? Well, I put up here unprovable, because you cannot prove that. I mean, essentially, a specimen that has always been isolated would have to be something that's in a little box that is carefully lined, probably with lead or with something like that, to keep it from getting any other isotopes that are going to leach into it or leach out of it. So assumption number one is that, what did we say assumption number one was? Decay rates have always been constant. Assumption number 2 is the rock or specimen has always been isolated from other isotopes. To give you a little idea of this, think about this in the hospital setting, okay? Have any of you had your blood drawn at the hospital? Okay, I see nurses at the back. You guys have drawn blood, the vampire team back there, okay? So they go, and when they draw blood, one of the things they teach us when you draw blood is don't let the blood touch other blood. Duh. Can you imagine? I'm going to go to Ave, and I'm like, hey, Ave, I'm going to draw your blood, okay? So I got my needle, sharpen it up really good. I got my alcohol, ready to clean the site, and oh, I don't have any vials. I got this vial from the other patient, so I'll just use this one. Is it okay if I just mix that way, just one vial, 2 patients? I mean, that would be like, whoa, heresy, because if I use a vial that already has blood in it, what has it done to his sample? Completely messed it up. His sugar might be 90, the little blood in here might be 400, and now we have 350 is what comes out in the lab. So you want to keep your samples separate. And this is the assumption we have with radioisotope dating, is that assumption number 2 is he's been isolated from all other isotopes. Let's look at assumption number 3. The rock or specimen, when it was born, should date at 0 years old, okay? So if I say this is 300 million years old, 100 million years ago, what should it date at? 200 million years old. Oh, you're so bright, okay? And 100 million years before that, what should this date at? 100 million years. And if this was born 300 million years ago, 300 million years ago, if I tested this, what should it say? 0, because it's a baby, it was just born. Does that make sense? If this is born and it comes out, if it's born and it's saying 400 million years old, is that going to be accurate? No. So these are assumptions, and they're like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. I mean, Ave here, I'm not going to tell you how old he is today, but when he was 20 years old, you know what he looked like? A 20-year-old. And whenever he was 1 hour old, little Ave, 1 hour old, he looked like a 1 hour old infant because he was 1 hour old. He didn't come out saying, hey, happy Sabbath, praise the Lord, beautiful set of teeth, full head of hair. We're like, uh-oh, you don't look like you are 1 hour old. So the same with this rock. We would assume that if it was born, it should date at 0 years old. Does that kind of make sense? Okay, I have a question for you. What was assumption number 2? Very good. It's a closed system, right? What was assumption number 3? Anybody remember assumption number 3? Yeah, it's right up there on the screen. When it's 0 years old, it should date at 0 years old. Okay. Now, there's about 7 assumptions when you talk at radioisotope datings. If you want to learn more about those, you can email me at adventistpastor. I can send those to you, adventistpastor@gmail.com. But what we're going to do now is we're just going to talk about some of these assumptions, okay? Decay rates have always been constant. We know that's not true. Scientists know that's not true. The decay rate of any radioactive mineral can be altered if the mineral is bombarded by high-energy particles from space, such as neutrinos, cosmic rays, etc. There is, for a time, a nearby radioactive mineral emitting radiation. So if this little guy is there and there's something else over here emitting some radiation, it's going to change the decay rates here. And also, physical pressure is brought to bear upon the radioactive mineral. Now, here's my rock. He has pressure right now at sea level, atmospheric pressure at sea level right now. Do you think this is the way this rock has been his whole life? Oh, no. Do you think he's had other pressure? Yes, sometimes he's been underground, sometimes he's been above ground, sometimes he's had caterpillars roll over him, sometimes he even had a deer lay down on top of him. I mean, pressure has always changed on this specimen. So we can't say it's always been the same because, you know what? Physical pressure can change the decay rate. So assumption number 1, decay rates have always been constant. We know that's not true. Certain chemicals are brought in contact with it. Sometimes we have acid rain, sometimes we have regular rain, sometimes our rain might be, have some pollutants in it. This can change the decay rates of the particles. Unprovable assumption number 2, the rock specimen has always been isolated from all other isotopes. It's a closed system. Now, got a question for you. Do you think these rocks have always been isolated from other rocks? This is a river rock. That is a riverbed. It's impossible for this to have never touched anything else in his whole life. So right there, that assumption goes out the door. I mean, can you imagine if I come to the lab and I have my little lab vials and I've been out as a phlebotomist collecting blood around the hospital, and I come in with 3 vials and I've collected blood from 20 patients? You'd have to say, there's something wrong with your specimens, buddy. You have contaminated it. You know what? All of these have been contaminated by touching other rocks. So that automatically changes their decay rate. The rock or specimen, when it was born, should date at 10 years old. We know that's not true, and let me give you some examples, okay? Here is a rock being born. Baby rock, day number 1. You know what you call this? Lava. So let's say that you have a lava flow, and the lava goes out, and it goes around this dinosaur. And it gets the dinosaur, and it completely covers the dinosaur. And then later on, they come and they find the dinosaur, and they're like, it's stuck in lava. Oh, how old is it? Let's test the lava. So we test the lava, the hardened rock around it, and we come up with a date of 300 million years, and we're like, this dinosaur died 300 million years ago. Is that true or false? Is it accurate? Well, we can't say if it's true or false, but we can say definitely it's not accurate, and here's how we know it's not accurate. Do you remember what unprovable assumption number 3 was? Anybody remember what number 3 was? When the rock was born, it should be at 0, right? A volcano in New Zealand with 1 lava flow in 1949. We know when the lava was forming, okay? In 1949, 3 in 1954, and 1 in 1975. They go back and they test that lava, and isotope dates for these flows range from 27,000 to 3.5 million years old. So if you have a rock that is born and it comes out dating at 3.5 million years, is that going to give me an accurate date when I test to see over here? The answer is no. It's not coming out. I mean, when Abe was born, if he came out with a little thing saying, I'm 27 years old, we'd be like, well, you know what? If you say you're 55 now, that's not accurate because when you were born, you started at 27. So this is what we see happening with radioactive isotopes is when we can actually test newborn rocks. They're not dating at 0. Let me give you another example, okay? Sunset Crater in Arizona. Sunset Crater, an Arizona volcano, is known from tree ring dating to be about 1,000 years old. 1,000 years old, it blew its stack. But potassium argon put it at over 200,000 years ago. Rangitoto, New Zealand. Anybody been to Rangitoto? I don't even know where it's at. Oh, it's in New Zealand, okay? Rangitoto, New Zealand, this is a volcano. And for the volcanic island of Rangitoto in New Zealand, potassium argon dated its lava flows as 145,000 to 465,000 years old, but the Journal of the Geochemical Society noted that the radiocarbon, geological, and botanical evidences unequivocally shows that it was active and was probably built during the last 1,000 years. In fact, wood buried underneath its lava has been carbon dated as less than 350 years old. This doesn't come from a religious journal. This comes from a scientific journal, and they're essentially saying when we test the wood in the lava flows, it's testing at 350 years. When we test the lava flows, it's testing at, what did we see? 145,000 to 465,000 years. And it appears like this thing blew about 1,000 years ago. Does this sound very accurate? Mount St. Helens. Anybody seen Mount St. Helens? Anybody here? Okay, I see a few hands up. Mount St. Helens is up there in, I think it's in Ohio, right? Just a test. So Mount St. Helens blew off in Ohio, Missouri, in Washington State, and that was, I think, 24 million years ago? No, it was 1980. 1980. The domes of Mount St. Helens, formed in 1980, date from 400,000 years old to 2.8 million years old. So this is radioisotope dating, and they're going and they're testing Mount St. Helens, and we know when these lava flows were flowing, and they're coming out, not dating zero. They're coming out dating, and you're talking a huge range, 400,000 to 2.8 million. This seems like an awful lot, but just imagine buying a house in the Bay Area, okay? If you were to buy a house, a nice 5-bedroom house in the Bay Area at 400,000, how many of you think that's a good deal? Okay? Would you move up to 2.8 million for the same house? I mean, we're talking about a huge range here, okay? The difference between 400,000 and 2.8 million is a lot, and this is the range they're getting for these domes, these lava domes on Mount St. Helens, when we know they went off. Now, one of the things that's interesting is a lot of scientists, whenever they're submitting a rock or submitting a specimen, they will actually fill out on their form, what age would you like? What age are you looking for? Because what we can do is we can kind of look at our different methods to try to give you the age that you're looking for. Let me give you some examples, okay? Leakey was a researcher, and he found a skull, and it's known as Leakey's skull 1470, and he wanted this skull to be really old. He wanted it to be the earliest specimen that had ever been found, and so he started testing it. Well, what happened? The rocks the skull were found in, so you have to test the rocks, because he wanted his skull to be millions of years old. He can't use carbon-14, because that would put it less than 50,000, so he's going to use the rocks it was found in. So, again, if you find a skull and you test the rocks around it, that's the assumption that the rocks were babies whenever the skull was there. Now, if I die and you guys, not you, but let's say a generation, hundreds of years down the road, like, I'd like to know when Pastor Mark died. So they dig me up and they test the rocks where they find my skull. Do you think that's going to tell them what year I died? No, but this is kind of the research that was going on here, okay? So they started testing the rocks that the skull was found in. They're like, okay, we found the skull, let's test the rocks around it. They dated 212 to 230 million years old. Well, Leakey was like, that's too old. Man evolved 2.3 million years ago, so we can't use those dates. So then they went to Cambridge University, and they dated it as 2.4 to 2.6 million years old, and they said that's too old. They had already decided some pig fossils in the area were younger. So now they take this skull and they cart it off to another place to test it. These are not accurate, okay? Berkeley dated it at 1.8 million years old, and they're like, nope, that's too young. Leakey wanted his skull to be the oldest human skull found. So they took it back to Cambridge University, and they dated it at 290,000 to 19.5 million years old, and they are like, let's throw those out. We're just not even going to publish those dates. So then they take their skull, and they take it back, and whoops, I lost my place. Today, a date of 2 million years old is somewhat accepted for the skull. The public, however, is led to believe that this is a firm and exact date. Now, let me just give that to you as an example, okay? Let's say that you have diabetes. And so you're just not feeling well, your tummy hurts, you're diaphoretic, and you're like, I think my blood sugar is out of whack. So you go to the hospital, and the nurse comes in and says, hi, my name is Mark. I'm going to be your nurse. I'm going to prick your finger. So we prick your finger, and we stick it into the little, AccuCheck, and this little machine, it's accurate, right? And so we stick it in, and it comes back as 600, and the doctor walks in and says, nope, I don't like that. So then another person comes in and says, hi, my name is Jane. I'm going to draw your blood. And they take it down to the lab. And your blood sugar comes back as 19. And the doctor goes, nah, I don't accept that. I mean, can you imagine if they were to test your blood 8 times and finally the doctor decides which one he's going to go with? That's the one he chooses? I mean, this is what we find happening with Leakey's skull, is they went from Cambridge to Berkeley to this lab, and finally they found one that kind of sounded right, and they're like, okay, now that's the one we're going to publish in the article. If dating methods are objective and reliable, they should agree. Now, this is an objective fact, okay? If these are accurate, they should agree. Think about this for just a moment, okay? Let's say that I go and I get my blood drawn at Stanford and my potassium comes back at 3.5. If I go to UCSF and they draw my blood and my potassium comes back at 7.5, suddenly you're like, that doesn't make sense. And then I'm like, wait, hold on, I'm going to go to San Jose. So I go to San Jose and they draw my blood and my potassium is 1. I'm like, hey, I'm going to Quest. I go to Quest, they draw it, and it's 4.3. I mean, it's all over the map. You'd have to say, this doesn't make sense. This test is not accurate. Because in medicine, all the tests should be within range. We call it a margin of error. So let's say that you do the AccuCheck and your blood sugar is 90 and you go to the lab and it's 92 and you go over to Quest and it's 95. It's all still kind of in that area and there's a margin of error. Well, let's look and see what they do here with these different tests, okay? So they tested 6 different potassium-argon tests, 5 different rubidium-strontium tests, a rubidium-strontium isochron and a lead-to-lead isochron on the same thing, okay? So they tested it. They used one specimen and they tested them using all these different tests, and these are the dates they got. 10,000 to 117 million years was the 6 different potassium tests. 5 rubidium, I think I'm saying that right, 1.2 to 1.4 billion years. Then we see the third one down there is 1.3 billion years, and the lead-to-lead is 2.6 billion years. Do you see the broad range here? Now, I know when we talk about millions and billions, it kind of confuses us. But do you know how much 1 billion is? That's 1,000 million. 1,000 millions is 1 billion. So for us to go from 10,000 years to 2.6 billion years on the same specimen, that is a huge range. This isn't the difference between saying your potassium is 4.2 or 4.3. This would be like saying your potassium is 4 or it's 27. I mean, you're talking a huge range here. It's not accurate. William D. Stansfield, he's a pastor. No, I'm just joking. He's a professor at UC Santa Barbara. He's a scientist. This is what he says in his book, and it's interesting. His book says The Science of Evolution. So this is scientific here, okay? Several methods have been devised for estimating the age of the Earth and its layers of rocks. These methods rely heavily on the assumption of uniformitarianism, i.e., natural processes have proceeded at relatively constant rates throughout the Earth's history. It is obvious that radiometric techniques may not be the absolute dating methods that they claimed to be. Oh, that's an interesting statement. Let's read on. Age estimates on a given geological stratum by different radiometric methods are often quite different, sometimes by hundreds of millions of years. There is no absolutely reliable long-term radiological clock. And that comes from the book, The Science of Evolution. So when we look at radiocarbon dating is known as kind of the go-to. This is the gold standard. This is what many of us have been taught. I was fortunate to be homeschooled up to the time of high school, and then I went to state college from then on for all of my education until I got my theology degree. But I was always taught that evolution is fact, and how do we know evolution is fact? Mainly because of radiocarbon dating. I had a lot of doubts in my mind when I was growing up. What do I believe? Do I believe the Bible or do I believe science? Do I believe the Bible or do I believe the facts? These things that I had learned were facts, I'm finding out they are not accurate. Even some of the scientists that use them, they will say they're not accurate, like we just read from some of the scientists earlier. But then when we go over to the creation side, all you got's the Bible. Actually, no, we don't just have the Bible. Let me share with you in the few minutes we have left some evidence. Again, we're talking about evidence this morning, some evidence that the earth is young, and that the Bible's idea of a young earth, about 6,000, or we could say less than 10,000 years, is there evidence for that? Let's take a look. Think about our sun. I don't recommend you look at it, but the sun is out there. This beautiful thing called the sun. I just love pictures of the sun because it's like, I can't see that, but boy, that sure looks good on the screen. There's something known as solar collapse. Research studies indicate that our sun is gradually shrinking at a steady rate. By analyzing data from the Greenwich Observatory in the period of 1836 to 1953, John A. Eddy, Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics and High Altitude Observatory in Boulder, and Aram Bornasian, mathematician with S. Ross and Company in Boston, have found evidence that the sun has been contracting at about 0.1% per century during that time, corresponding to a shrinkage rate of about 5 feet per hour. I mean, the sun is huge, so don't be afraid. You're still going to be able to get your suntan, next year and the next year and the next year, but it's slowly shrinking down. And digging deep into historical records, Eddy has found 400-year-old eclipse observations that are consistent with such a shrinkage. This was an article in Physics Today. The sun is shrinking. Tiny, a little bit at a time, but it still is shrinking. Now you might say, well, what's the big deal about that? Well, at the sun's rate of shrinking, as little as 50,000 years ago, the sun would have been so large that our oceans would boil. But in far less a time than 50,000 years ago, life here would have ceased to exist. I mean, think about that, okay? Here's the sun, here's the earth. If it's shrinking, then that means that years and years and years ago, it used to be out here, which means that this would be hotter and hotter over here. So they're saying that 50,000 years ago, at the rate of shrink on the sun, life would not have even existed on this planet. So when we look at solar shrinkage or solar collapse, that points to a young solar system. Let's talk about the moon. Any of you saw the full moon like this past week? Wasn't that beautiful? I had people texting me pictures of it. It's like it was a beautiful full moon. When you look at the moon, we know a lot about the moon because we can look at it through the microscope. We can through the telescope. But people have actually been on the moon. Unless you're one of those people that don't think we were, that's fine. We won't argue about that today. I think we were. Evolutionists had long held to the fact that the Earth and moon are about the same age. So evolutionists will tell you the sun and the moon, they're about the same age, which they believe is billions of years old. It is believed by many that the Earth and its moon are billions of years old. If that were true, the moon would by now have built up 20 to 60 miles layer of dust on it. You thought your house had a lot of dust. Just imagine. After billions of years, you would have miles of dust. R.A. Littleton says the lunar surface is exposed to direct sunlight, and strong ultraviolet light and X-rays from the sun can destroy the surface layers of exposed rocks and reduce them to dust at the rate of a few 10,000th of an inch per year. But even the minute amount could, during the age of the moon, be sufficient to form a layer over it several miles deep. Back in the 60s, when they were talking about going to the moon, one of the concerns they had was, if we go to the moon and we lower our people, what if they just settle into just sink into the dust and just sink down for like a mile? We've lost them. That's one of the reasons why they sent unmanned vehicles up there first, is to kind of test it out and see, hey, you just won't want to jump in and bloop, you just disappear in this dust that's, a mile thick. In 5 to 10 billion years, 3 or 4 10,000th of an inch per year would produce 20 to 60 miles of dust deep. And guess what? When they got to the moon, they walked around. Does it look like he's sinking into the dust? When Neil Armstrong landed on the moon, he found that there was not over 2 or 3 inches of dust on its surface. That is the amount one would expect if the moon was about 6,000 to 8,000 years old. Some of that little evidence that makes us say, you know what, maybe the Bible is correct. Dr. Littleton's facts were correct. Solar radiation does indeed turn the moon rocks into dust. With only a few inches of dust, the moon cannot be older than a few thousand years old. So, this famous picture, footprint on the moon, I believe that footprint on the moon is evidence for what the Bible teaches. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, about 6,000 years ago. One of the things they did when they were up at the moon was they collect moon rocks. And they went around and they collected these rocks. They brought them back, and they didn't give them out as souvenirs. They did all these tests on the rocks, and they found something interesting. When they collected these rocks, many wonder what value there has been in collecting moon rocks. One of the most surprising moon rock discoveries is seldom mentioned. You know why it's seldom mentioned? Well, let me mention it to you today. Short-lived uranium-236 and thorium-230 were found in those stones. Short-term radioactive isotopes do not last long. They quickly turn into their end product, which is lead. If the moon were even 50,000 years old, these short-life radioisotopes would long since have decayed into lead. But instead, they were relatively abundant in the moon rocks. The moon cannot be older than several thousand years old. So some people ask me, they're like, do you have any evidence for creation? Do you have any evidence for what the Bible says? Yes, this is evidence right here. The moon rocks, the dust on the moon, it's telling us the moon is not millions and billions of years old. The moon is relatively young. We're running out of time. Let me read this for you, okay? This is from the New Scientist. There ought to be about 1,000 times as much helium in the atmosphere as there is. So if you just look at our atmosphere, they look and they're like, where did all the helium go to? There should be about 1,000 times more. Why? Because if the Earth was millions and millions of years old, we should have had a lot more helium up there. This comes from another scientific journal. Larry Vardaman says, on the basis of atmospheric helium content, the Earth cannot be over 10,000 years old. One more here for you. How many of you have ever seen a shooting star? Shooting star? For those of you that want to learn how to take pictures of shooting stars with your iPhone, I just learned this past week how you can have a 30-second time lapse on your iPhone. It's so cool. I can show you afterwards. I got my first shooting star on my phone the other night. I thought it was kind of neat. But you know, shooting stars come and they can leave craters on the Earth when they collide with the Earth and stuff. They've uncovered a lot of these meteors. I think I'm saying that right, you know, and they're kind of like these rocks that come shooting and they light up, and some of them actually make contact with the Earth. A lot of them make contact with the Earth. They've found these, and they're usually made out of minerals or metal. Here's one. I would love to have found that one, as long as it didn't hit me in the head. These are just pictures of the meteors that have made contact with the Earth. You cut them in two, and they're made out of metal. Isn't that beautiful? Meteors of various types are continually plunging into Earth's atmosphere, and some reach the surface and are then called meteorites. Supposedly, this has been happening for millions of years, yet all the meteorites discovered are always right next to the Earth's surface. There are no exceptions. That's interesting. No meteorite has ever been found in the geological column. So they dig down, and they're like, oh, this was like 50 million years ago. Well, there's no meteors there. That seems to indicate that our Earth is young. Probably these different layers that were laid down very quickly during the time of the flood, and our Earth is a young Earth because all the meteors have been found at the surface. They're not found down in the geological column that people have said have been laid down slowly over millions and millions of years. For many years, I have searched for meteorites or meteoric material in sedimentary rocks. I have interviewed the late Dr. G.P. Murrell of the U.S. National Museum and Dr. Pryor of the British Natural History Museum, both well-known students of meteorites, and neither man knew of a single occurrence of a meteorite in sedimentary rocks. And this comes from the magazine Science. Again, this points to a young Earth. This points to an Earth that has not been here for millions and millions and millions of years, or even billions of years, but just a few thousand years. No meteorite has ever been found deeper into the sedimentary strata. If the Earth were very ancient, many should be found farther down. This is another evidence of a young Earth. We're going to skip this one. This is interesting. So when we look at the different theories, evolution, and you look at creation, a lot of people believe that all the evidence points to evolution. When we look at it, a lot of the evidence that points to evolution is questionable, but there also is a lot of evidence that points to creation. I haven't been able to cover a lot this morning, but I hope that what I've been able to cover is enough to help you realize that when we read in the Bible, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. This isn't something we just take by faith. This is something that is supported by evidence. This is something that is supported by scientific evidence that you and I can base our faith on that help us build our faith that the rest of God's word is correct. Hope you learned something today. Just want to close with a Bible verse. You've probably seen this before. First of all, you must understand that in the last days, scoffers will come, scoffing and following their own evil desires. They will say, "Where is this coming he promised? Ever since our fathers died, everything goes on as it has since the beginning of creation." But they deliberately forget that long ago, by God's word, the heavens existed and the earth was formed out of water and by water. By these waters also the world of that time was deluged and destroyed. By the same word, the present heavens and earth are reserved for fire, being kept for the day of judgment and destruction of ungodly men. Creation, I believe, is a fact. The flood is a fact. And by faith, we look forward to the day when Jesus is coming back. If we do not choose to follow Jesus Christ, then we hold on to our idols, we hold on to our sin, we will be destroyed with the sin. But just like these other events have evidence for them, by faith we know that what the future holds is not millions and millions of years of change and humans become extinct. No, God is coming back to get his kids, and he wants to have a relationship with you and I for eternity. The question is, do we want to spend eternity with him? Let's bow our heads for prayer. Dear God in heaven, we just want to thank you for giving us the Bible. And I just pray that each one of us here would continue to search for answers so that we can build our faith. I pray that each one of us here would foster a attitude that we want to protect our faith, to grow our faith, because it's our faith in Jesus Christ that will save us. I pray that you would lead people into our pathway, that you would help us to hear lectures or read journals that would show us the evidence that will help build our faith. Be with the people that are going through difficult times in their life. I pray that you would just draw close to them in a special way and help each one of us this coming week to draw closer to you. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. I'd like to invite our worship team to come up. Let's all come up together, and we're going to sing our closing song, "I Sing the Mighty Power of God." That mighty power of God spoke, "Let there be light," and guess what? There was light. And then God spoke and said, "Let there be atmosphere," and there was atmosphere. And God said, "Let there be dry land," and there was dry land. I mean, that's what we're singing about today. Let's all stand together and sing hymn number 88, "I Sing the Mighty Power of God."
I sing the mighty power of God that makes the mountains rise, that spreads the flowing seas abroad and build the lofty skies. I sing the wisdom that ordained the sun to rule the day. The moon shines full at his command, and all the stars obey. I sing the goodness of the Lord that fills the earth with food. He formed the creatures with his word and then pronounced them good. Lord, how thy wonders are displayed where I turn my eye. If I survey the ground I tread, or gaze upon the sky, there's not a plant or flower below, but makes thy glories known. And clouds arise and tempests blow by order from thy throne. Creatures that borrow life from thee are subject to thy care. There's not a place where we can flee, but God is present there.
just love that line. There's not a place where we can flee. Let's say it all together. But God is present there. Isn't that good news? Our God is not a local God like the Canaanite gods. Our God is not a distant God like the Babylonian gods. Our God is a God that wants to have a relationship with us. Just remember, friends, today when we leave God's house, He's not staying here. He's coming with us. He's coming to our schools. He's coming to our jobs. He's coming to our homes. So let's just invite Him into our hearts. Let's read this all together, okay? Lord, take my heart, for I cannot give it. It is Thy property. Keep it pure, for I cannot keep it for Thee. Save me in spite of myself, my weak, unchristlike self. Mold me, fashion me, raise me into a pure and holy atmosphere where the rich current of Thy love can flow through my soul. Amen. You may be seated. Just want to let you know that we have a fellowship meal for you downstairs. We'd love for you to stay, especially our visitors. And if you come on a regular basis and eat with us, please bring some food. We need some assistance down in the kitchen, so if you're a good chef, better than me, please bring some food. If you parked in the middle of our parking lot, you might be blocking other people, so before you stay and eat, go out and move your car so that we can let those people out that need to leave. And just have a wonderful week. God bless you. We look forward to seeing you next Sabbath.